to weld the whole geometric edifice together. If the witness just sits there, nothing happens. If the witness shifts position, if the third point moves, then the whole triangle changes its shape. This applies to any witness, but returning to my starting point, it also applies forcefully to the Jewish witness who is called on to respond. The implication of a witness also represents a turn to law and hence a call to justice, and this can perhaps alleviate one of the difficulties with Butler's evocative reference to occupation, which is that in universalizing it, it seems to allow the occupation to occur and then demand responsibility and a struggle for non-violence on the part of occupied and occupier alike. There is such a thing as justice, after all, that alerts us to the radical difference in power between these two positions. This leads us back to the specific question of Israel-Palestine, where the depressing truth seems to be that every opportunity for non-violent resolution of differences and the advancement of the necessary cohabitation is spurned. We can interpret this politically in terms of the interests it serves. Psychosocially and psychodynamically, we can also understand it in part as the reciprocal automatic violence that hurt produces, the suffering of two peoples which binds them together but offers insufficient distance for the creation of dependency and trust. Non-violent resistance in such circumstances is a huge gamble. Each party lays itself open to the risk of being abused, and there is little in the history to indicate that that risk can be overcome. Though one has to say that the gamble involved in a non-violent response is also much greater on one side, where suffering is entrenched, than on the other. Nevertheless, it's a necessary gamble, one that forges a route towards ethical subjectivity and relationality, and also, in the most practical way, makes cohabitation a possibility. In pushing towards this, the third as victim is crucial. Without its active engagement, the collapse of the two subjects into violence seems almost inevitable. Yet the temptation of the witness is to withdraw. It's always easier to give in to this temptation than to resist it, to become involved in the struggle towards non-violence from the dual position of active ethical prohibitive engagement, which means speaking out against what's happening, and participatory ethical attachment, being involved in struggles towards reconciliation and justice. Who is the witness here that might be called on to facilitate this process? Jessica, amongst others, identifies the state players, the USA, Germany, the West, and so on, and this is clearly correct. But each of us comes at it from our own specific location, and whether or not anyone cares what we think, we have to grab hold of the situation and state, wherever we are, however precarious our position in our communities or families or countries, that this cannot be allowed to go on, that the damage is too great, now and in the past and in the future. Who do we say this to? In the first instance, our own communities, which, as I noted at the start, can be the hardest place of all. In the second, there is a necessary reciprocal movement between the act of speaking out of the witness and the act of listening to the oppressed. That is to say, the kind of rigorous engagement with the other that the theorists drawn on here advocate involves opening oneself to the other's voice as it speaks things that may be very difficult to hear. I mean this in the context of the events with which I started, where listening was clearly not part of the audience's agenda. But it applies here too. Put bluntly, I am aware that in the exposition of this challenging theoretical material, and in drawing a lesson about speaking out from within the Jewish community, the emotional challenge of being responsive to the demand for justice that comes from Palestinian suffering may be avoided.
Thank you, Stephen. I'm amazed to inform you that in a conference full of Middle Eastern people, we have finished on time. And there's an hour break for coffee, and we will return, inshallah, at 12 o'clock. So please come back on time as well.